They swept through cities and kingdoms, riding their dead horses, hunting with their packs of pale spiders, big as hounds.
Hey everybody, it's Charlie. We got all kinds of Game of Thrones stuff to break down. They just announced Naomi Watts is officially joining the cast of the prequel series. They gave a little preview of her character, so I'll break that down. And because a lot of this prequel series is tied up in The Long Night and the White Walkers, we need to talk about how they'll complete their arc full circle at the end of Game of Thrones Season 8. So we'll start with the Naomi Watts prequel stuff because that tees up what's happening with the White Walkers during Season 8. We're doing a new round of the giveaway for the Fire and Blood book that's coming out next month. All you have to do to enter that is be a subscriber and leave a Game of Thrones related comment on the video. The official news release for Naomi Watts reads like this. It says, created by Jane Goldman and George R.R. Martin, the prequel takes place thousands of years before the events of Game of Thrones. It chronicles the world's descent from the golden age of heroes into its darkest hour, and only one thing is for sure, from the horrifying secrets of Westeros' history to the true origin of the White Walkers, the mysteries of the East and the Starks of legend, it's not the story we think we know. So that sort of plays into the character that Naomi Watts is playing. The official character description reads that she's playing a charismatic socialite hiding a dark secret. The fact that they're announcing Naomi Watts first, too, also implies that she's going to be one of the main, if not the main character, but it's an ensemble the same way that the main show is. Like Dan and Dave said that they went to Peter Dinklage first to cast him for Tyrion before they cast any of the other actors on the show, but that doesn't mean that Tyrion is the only main character. Like you have Jon Snow, Daenerys, which most of the plot is focusing on during Season 8, but you still have people like Cersei, you have Jaime, so you have a large ensemble. Some seasons, certain characters get more scenes than others. So like early on, Tyrion used to get way more dialogue than the other characters. Later seasons relying more heavily on Cersei, Jon Snow, Daenerys, so it's split a little more evenly. But because of the way they describe her, being a relatively highborn, socialite person who's very charismatic, sounds very collected, she sounds like she's a member of one of the major houses, especially being that she's such a huge name and they want to be familiar to the main series without just recycling plot from that. So she's probably a member of one of the major houses that's still around in present day. And there are only a couple of those whose complexion that she fits. Like, she does not look Dornish. There are a lot of people that are theorizing that she might also be Valyrian, because around this time, you're seeing the rise of the Valyrian freehold. Because remember, they say the transition from the Age of Heroes to the Long Night, meaning that during the first season, we could see the beginning of the full-blown Long Night. Like, obviously, it's a huge deal, the transition from summer to winter. They've done that in the last 2 seasons on the main show, like where you go to the farm during Season 4 with Arya, the Hound beats up the farmer, takes his money, then during Season 7, they come back and it's covered in snow. It's barely recognizable. Just enough till it's familiar and you see their bodies in the corner, and then the Hound has that brief flashback where he remembers them. The prequel series is filming the pilot starting in February around the same areas where a lot of the main show of Game of Thrones was filmed, so it'll look very familiar, but it'll be during a more winter time of year. So however fast the transition happens, it just seems like it'll be one of the big things that they do during Season 1. Like Season 1 of Game of Thrones, obviously a couple big twists. You learn about the White Walkers in the pilot, they push Bran out the window, and then the really big twist at the end was killing Ned Stark, the person that you thought had been the main character the whole time. So I wouldn't expect them to repeat too many of those big twists, which is why like the dark secret that Naomi Watts' character is hiding probably doesn't have anything to do with being a secret Targaryen. There are a lot of people that are theorizing now, and I actually kind of like this theory, that she might have ties to the Stark of Winterfell that becomes the Night King. That would be the darkest of dark secrets that you could have. And if the show is only going to run for 7 to 8 seasons and we're seeing the transition to the Long Night, and maybe we'll see the beginning of the building of the wall towards the end of the series, there could be some time jumps season to season, because the problem with history during this period, like 8 to 10,000 years ago, is that so much time goes by without specific dates being recorded. They just say, oh, you know, the wall was built around 8,000 years ago, and the rise of the Valyrian freehold happened sometime between 4 and 8,000 years ago. There's a really big margin of error, but it's totally possible that she could be a Valyrian, but the only other regions and kings that were around at that time that we know about were the Starks of Winterfell, the Kings of Winter, the Hightowers, the Lannisters, Garth Greenhand of House Gardner, because the Gardners ruled the Reach at that time. Garth Greenhand is also talked about as being the first High King of Westeros, but history around that period is very spotty and unreliable. They actually built that into the pitch for the prequel series. It's not the history you think you know. There was House Durrandon, they were the first Storm Kings, the Grey King of the Iron Islands, the Boltons were around during that period. Then a little while after the rise of the Valyrian Freehold is when the Rhoynish came over and formed what is now modern-day Dorne. So obviously Naomi Watts does not look like she could be Dornish, so I'm assuming she's not from that far south. But like I said, they want to be as familiar as possible, so that's why I like the theory that she is a Stark of Winterfell, and she will have ties to the person that became the Night King. We don't know which Stark King it was, it's just implied that he was a Stark of Winterfell. But again, they're really fuzzy on what the timeline of the series is going to be, because for the most part, the main show has moved in real time. So like you meet the Starks, they age about 1 year per season. So unless they want to have one of the most downer, unresolved endings, you can't do the transition to the Long Night and the end of the Long Night all within like a 7-year time span. You'd have to do some crazy time jump, which I think would make more sense to do in the pilot so that the regular characters can age in real time. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about Naomi Watts, and which character do you think that she's playing, and what is that dark secret that she's hiding? Now, getting to Season 8 White Walker stuff, the reason why I'm thinking that they're going to just completely get rid of them by the finale is because if you think about the prequel in the main series as existing as part of the same story, just at different ends of the timeline, the prequel series is covering the war between the Children of the Forest, the First Men, in the more complex reasons why they created the White Walkers, why it was the Night King rebelled against the Children of the Forest, they lost control, and you wind up with a scenario in present day. It makes sense that they would close that loop and they would end the White Walkers arc, get rid of them completely, while also getting rid of the rest of the Children of the Forest, because it seems like they're linked. Like that's the price they pay for creating this thing that has ravaged Westeros for so long. Even though the reason why they created the White Walkers was a little more noble, to protect the earth from these invaders that were coming in, cutting down all their weirwoods. Even though the First Men are complicit and all that, the Children of the Forest are really the ones to blame for their creation. So the ultimate price that they pay is that they would go extinct. It makes sense that if you're going to get rid of the Night King, it's also going to be the end of the Children of the Forest too. So that Lord of the Rings style, you have a lot of magical creatures slowly leaving the earth and man is left to inherit and try to figure things out on their own. Although I do believe that there will be dragon eggs, Jon Snow and Daenerys will have a child, and just because they get rid of White Walkers doesn't mean that magic in general will leave the earth. You still have the Red Priests, you still have Shadowbinders, sorcerers, it's just that the Children of the Forest were more attuned to the earth and the old gods. Leave all your Game of Thrones video requests in the comments below. Congratulations, Lord Snow, you're the book giveaway winner from my last big Game of Thrones video. Click here to watch Peter Dinklage talking about Season 8, and click here for my new Arya video. Thank you so much for watching, everybody stay awesome, I'll see you guys tonight.